If you want to chime in on what's happening with your favorite KFAN shows, you can make your voice heard on the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Just let us know what you have to say by texting your message to 64686. That is 64686, standard text message and day rate supply.
All right, Vikings fans, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 64686. Questions, observations for Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. He is in studio and will be here for the hour, so plenty of time to get into pretty much all of this. We have several more Vikings talking points to get to as well. I want to get to a talking point early. I labeled it the Los Angeles Rams of Anaheim were not messing around.
From the 30, Stafford back to pass, throws left, poking Nakua wide open at the 50, between the number 50 and the hash marks, and he gets into Vikings territory after a gain of 27 yards. Pete, who says the Rams are nothing but short stuff? And Stafford goes back to pass, throws left, and it's caught. It's Higbee at the 18-yard line, and it's another first down for the Rams. It's a 22-yard hit by Higbee, who missed Week 8 against the Vikes.
Another big chunk play, and that's just Higbee running up the seam.
So it's first and goal for the LA Rams from the 5-yard line of the Minnesota Vikings. Matthew Stafford under center. Two tight ends to the right. Play action to Kyren Williams. He boots out to the left, throws over the middle. They lost Kyren. Wide open. Touchdown, Los Angeles Rams. It was a 5-yard touchdown where Stafford went play action to Williams. He spun around to the left, and Kyren leaped into the center of the end zone. He was wide open, 6-0 Rams.
Like I said, man, they came out from literally the first play and said, we're going after this.
Gouging them. And that, it was interesting because Sean McVay has some pettiness to him. And, I think we talked about last week that Brian Flores and the Vikings had admitted they were surprised that Nakua was played in that first game. And they wouldn't be surprised this time. And so, I didn't ask McVay, nobody asked McVay, but the very first play, are you surprised now? That felt like that's what it was. We're just gonna, drop back and we're gonna throw a chunk play and he's gonna be open. And we've talked about it, like that is like where the vulnerability of the scheme is that if you can protect, and you have a receiver who can get to a spot and find that open spot in the zone, that's there for you. And so they just marched down the field taking advantage of that. And it was hard not to think of that whole Nakua activation brouhaha.
So
as a result.
Game certainly doesn't have to be over at 7-0.
No,
but they certainly set a tone right from the beginning that they weren't just here for the hell of it, for sure. And let's face it didn't get really all that much better. I think, so in the two games against the Rams, I think we had a grand total of 3 touchdowns.
It's 30-20, yep.
We had 2 in the first half of the first game, and we had one in this game when it was at a point where it was close to over already. That's not, I know you're Mr. KOC, quarterback whisperer, explosive offense. That ain't very explosive.
No, and it was interesting, O'Connell, in talking last night, was pretty clear, and I don't know if this is just a convenient explanation or if but I think it makes some sense as well. As they lost to 2 teams twice this year, the Lions and the Rams, and one of the commonalities between those with those 2 teams is the ability to launch an interior rush, to make things uncomfortable. What he said was it was a bad matchup. Teams that can do that against them. When it happens basically 4 times in the course of a couple months, you say, well, that's where the matchup is just doesn't work. And so I don't know that you can just give up on it and say, oh, well, just a bad matchup. You have to even, over the course of the offseason, you say, okay, we have to rebuild that middle of the offensive line. But in the course of a season, if you've identified that that's the bad matchup, it's not against the rules to try to figure out a way around that.
Okay, and let's go there next, because one of the debates I've had earlier with some of the listeners, or some of the texters at least, is many of them want to put like 95% of what ailed the offense on Darnold.
Yeah.
I'm not here to pretend he played well. He was inaccurate, not as inaccurate as early. In fact, I think you tweeted that out early.
Yeah.
that that erratic accuracy was not as bad early in the game, but he had a couple of bad throws, even a couple of swing passes where he couldn't complete those damn things when I'm asking him to go short. But I still think generally at a time like this, it is a shared responsibility. The line's got to be in it for sure. And I believe there's a continuation of a flaw that has reared its head from time to time, had reared its head against the Lions, and that is give a struggling quarterback, as you say, it's not illegal to try to come up with some other ideas, but that means not being arrogant and haughty about we do what we do, we like our matchups, and we're going down the field 27 yards.
I mean, you can, even if you want to start off that way, if it's not working out, and that was where I thought, and I put this in our little roundup off the game is, I think where O'Connell and he did say, I share responsibility. He didn't go into the details, but I think where he shares responsibility is if the plan that you have, is not working, and it's something you potentially could have anticipated because Darnold had not played as well last week and the protection was not great last week, then there needs to be a better answer than what they had. They did not seem to have an answer yesterday, last night for the occasion in which their offensive line is routinely getting beaten off the ball. And it wasn't just the interior. If you go look at that first,
that's true.
The first few plays, I think it was Verse on the very first play, just steamrolls Cam Robinson, the left tackle, into the pocket and then past Darnold, and he steps up a little bit, and then he gets sacked by the guy that Brian O'Neill was blocking. And then there was a run play, one play earlier where it was like an outside zone, and Aaron Jones is trying to get to the outside, and the guy that Brian O'Neill's blocking beats him and gets a tackle for a yard loss. And so it was right off the bat, and we shouldn't just put it on the guards in the center. It was
that's fair point.
Yeah. And O'Neill's great. Was their best offensive lineman over the course of the year because Darisaw was hurt.
Yeah.
But can't absolve him either.
Yeah, well, because the head coach was unusually frontal about, I think, I don't know who asked the question.
Craig.
It was Craig, because he was going interior, and for once, he didn't deflect that at all. He seemed to encourage that notion.
Yeah, and that's where he got into the discussion about matchups with teams like the Rams and the Lions, and I know you've been talking about it for years in terms of are they good enough there? And I think they found out through the course of the year they're not. It's not as easy as just saying, okay, we're got to get two new guards and a new center. I mean, there's limited avenues for doing that. Draft and free agency, and there will be people. There are some good offensive linemen whose contracts are expiring, but sometimes they resign, sometimes they get franchised. There's certainly no guarantee that the answers lie in free agency. If there's people on the roster who are ready to be promoted into those jobs, then we haven't seen them on the field. They drafted two offensive linemen this year, Walter Rouse and Michael Juergens, and they basically sort of redshirted this year. We'll see if either one of them becomes a factor, but step one is to identify the issue, but almost probably a more difficult in a short period of time is correcting it.
Do we not like intermediate routes or quote unquote hot routes or whatever?
It's a adjustment for them to do that, and O'Connell talked about trying to run the quick game yesterday, and it seemed as though the Rams were sniffing that out. And what was happening is that then Darnold was starting to look for, number 2, number 3. And then that's when the sacks were coming. And I think he averaged 4+ seconds that he was holding the ball. And I looked that up, and that's not high for the average sack, but he didn't have that much time. That was sort of the point. So he needed to, unfortunately, what he needed to do if his first quick ball pass was not available, he needed to either throw it away,
which, by the way, Stafford did plenty of times.
Throw it away.
Yeah. Maybe it's a chance I can complete it, but not a great chance. But I'm not going to. That's where he's very good about not taking the sack.
Yeah, and that's O'Connell was pointing out it's just as many things that Sam Darnold got better at. to assume it's a finished product.
Yeah.
And, Matthew Stafford's in his mid to late 30s, I think. And, if you think back to him at age 27, like he was different there.
Let me follow up on that because I asked Johnny this question. Darnold is 27.
Yeah.
But this was his first playoff experience.
Yeah.
Right? And you can argue quasi-playoff experience the week before in Detroit, and it didn't go very well in either case. But we were saying, if it's a younger player who's, let's say, rookie or second or third year, and it's their first playoff experience, we go, well, no, it's alarming. But guess what? It's not all that surprising. First or second time around in the playoffs ain't going to be, other than the kid from Washington, it's probably not going to be that easy to do. So does that in any way, you think, give the Vikings pause? Because the assumption now is we're punting on him. It's over. It was a nice run, but you can't possibly consider bringing him back, even if it's at a reasonable price. What do you think?
Yeah, I walked out of there, during the game and walking out of there last night, I thought, there's just no way he just wrote his ticket out of town. There's no way they could justify, if they're going to bring a veteran in to compete with the J.J. McCarthy or to cover for J.J. McCarthy until he's ready. You got to do it with somebody else. You can't bring a guy in who started 17 games for you, and then the following year say you're competing with this guy that wasn't even, on the practice field all season because he was hurt. But on the other hand, like how many different options are there for them to go to, and to what extent do you want to assume that O'Connell can work his magic with anybody? I think that was the point with Daniel Jones, and it might still end up being the case, but I've kind of backed off my there's just no way, no how. And I've also backed off my no way, no how that there wouldn't be any interest around the league from him as well, because when you let the dust settle, he's probably still the best, pending free agent quarterback that's available in a year where the draft class has not got too many people excited. And so it's supply and demand, and it's relative assessments. It's not, is this guy the next Joe Montana, or Steve Young or whoever? Is he, how much better or worse is he than the other people that are available? And, are you going to take Justin Fields over Sam Darnold if you're looking for a free agent? I don't know, probably not. And so I now sit here almost 24 hours later and think that I still believe that there's that the Vikings will legitimately assess the possibility of bringing him back under various forms, and I still think that that it won't just be a binary. They decide to bring him back or not, because I think that there's probably going to be more interest, maybe not at hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars interest, but there's going to be more interest in him than we probably think when we're still caught up in what happened last night.
Let's take a step back for a moment and ask you a more general question. How stunned were you that the game proceeded the way it was, the way it did, and flying utterly and completely off the rails for the Vikings?
It caught me off guard. I think we talked Sunday morning about this. I just didn't have a good feeling one way or the other for how this was going to go. I went into the Detroit game feeling pretty confident that they, on paper, it was a mismatch and that they had all the advantages and that they were going to roll. And, what I didn't anticipate was, the Darnold / pass rush issues that really scuttled that game. And I had seen
6 sacks at the half, right? 9 tying the record all time, right? For the playoffs?
That was last night.
Last time.
And the Lions, right?
You were talking about the Lions. Sorry.
Yeah, but so I didn't see that, but I had seen an example of Darnold, having a bad game in Jacksonville and then turning it around in the course of the week. I thought it was possible. In the back of my head, I wondered, that's still a pretty psychologically difficult thing to get over, is to have your worst game of the year in the most important pressure-packed game of the year and then come back in an even more important, even more pressure-packed situation and somehow have all your wits about you. So I didn't have a great feeling going into it that they were going to, win, frankly. But I was taken aback by how how the Rams moved the ball down the field on that first drive with these intentionally, downfield throws, with Stafford looking like he was playing 7-on-7.
They barely ran the first half, right?
Yeah. And then when they did, it was working pretty well.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I looked up the box score of 41 Donut just to see, because that's what it felt like that, and you were there at 40, where I think at 41 Donut,
sure,
and
I missed it.
That
anniversary is today for that game.
Okay, yeah, that was just like a breathtaking thing where you literally hadn't sat down and gotten your wits about you yet, and it was already 14-0, and so for people who are too young for 41 Donut. That game was 14-0 before the Vikings ran an offensive play. It was 3 minutes into the game. And so you literally had this week of build up to the NFC Championship game, and it's over at that point. And I felt, there was a point where the Lions second, I think the Rams scored. It was Vikings go 3 and out, and there's a sack and a negative rush, and just it looked all discombobulated. And then the Rams get the ball back. And they start driving down again. I'm like, this is 41 Donut. It's going to be 14-0. I think there was a penalty on the Rams.
The personal foul, late hit penalty is the only reason it was only 10-0.
It becomes 10-0. Right. And then I'm I started, I had made a hotel reservation for Philly, and I was getting ready to cancel it right then and there. And so I was surprised at how quickly it felt like they were in an insurmountable situation.
We were talking earlier, too, about we'll have time to examine a lot on both sides of the ball in this game. Although, as you say, it was so thorough, there's not that many flourishes, I guess, that we have to get specific on. But we got into the subject. PA talked this morning about the KOC rumor about teams, wanting to talk to the Vikings about acquiring him via trade.
Yeah.
And he seemed very bothered by the possibility that, I think the way he put it was, if any of that was planted by any of KOC's people, like his agent, he thought it was deplorable. The timing, which I thought was interesting coming from PA out of nowhere. I'm going, I wonder if he knows something about that. So while Johnny and I are talking about this, a texter texted this bit via 612. This is Steve from Medina. He said, my friend texted me about you talking about KOC trade rumors. I have a mid-level friend who works for the Rams who saw earlier this week and said a few days ago he absolutely could see that Rams higher-ups starting that kind of rumor to create a little chaos. He's always said McVay is so thorough and leaves no stone unturned. He respects him, but said he's a little bit of an evil genius. So I have no idea if you have any information suggesting McVay might have been the source to float it.
I was just accusing him of trolling them on the McVay thing. I didn't. I mean, on the Nakua thing.
Nakua, yeah.
I was not going that far.
It's deeper than that. But does any of that going to have anything to do with how these contract negotiations come out between KOC and the Vikings?
I don't have any evidence that the Wilfs were bothered by, or at least that they were blaming O'Connell or blaming his camp or whatever you want to call it for putting that out there and intentionally scuttling. It was not in O'Connell's best interest to scuttle or distract from the most important game of the year, followed by the even more important game of the year. And so I don't have any evidence to think that the Wilfs are bothered by that, or that their plans to extend him and the general manager as well this offseason will be curtailed by the timing of that. It was you look back on it and it's pretty unfortunate timing, because it was at the very height of KOC magic in the national environment, and then right after that they got blown out 2 straight weeks, and so that doesn't look that good.
56-15, I think was
the combined
eventual combined score. You had the one earlier in the game before it was over.
Yeah, and so I think that and I know Florio had a big long thing this morning about it, and so it's definitely people are definitely putting pieces together. I think they're saying they're taking the piece where there's no contract and the piece where there's this, there's a rumor put out by a respected reporter. And I do think everyone respects Jay Glazer.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say, or one of many things I'll say about Jay is he's always he never, when's the last time he got something wrong? And so all he reported was there's teams out there that would be interested. But what that implies is that there's teams who are at least in their minds are sniffing around and thinking that because O'Connell's not signed yet, or hasn't gotten a new contract, that there might be something going on. So sometimes these things get a life on their own.
Right.
When you keep pulling all the layers back, where's the evidence that there's something wrong, like that there's a dispute or there's something uncomfortable? There's no doubt that the owners put him and the general manager in a prove it situation this year. Not everybody likes being told that, especially when you're starting over at quarterback. But like, it wasn't completely unjustified. And if they had offered O'Connell a contract after the second year, it wouldn't have been the money he would think he is owed or deserves, because he'd just came off a 7-10 season. So like, you don't get your best offer there. So it was in his interest to go through with this. He proved it. They proved it together, and there's every reason to think that the contract is coming. And I don't have any reporting to suggest that there's any deep-seated issue that O'Connell is stewing about or trying to push his way out as a result of, or trying to do a power play or anything along those lines. Does that mean it's not happening?
Right.
No, but like, there's no reporting of that. There's just a lot of people putting puzzle pieces together to create that possibility.
Kevin Seifert is in studio for the hour. Let's take a bottom of the hour pause. We'll get to some text. We got more Vikings talking points to get to, and we are going the distance till 6:30 tonight. Don't go.
The Fan wants to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand at the National Cash Contest. Head to KFAN.com, enter the keyword credit. The keyword is credit, KFAN.com, keyword credit.
I think Blake Moore, perhaps with Abbott's help, or the two of you guys working together, have put together a medley that is allegedly going to include all 9 sacks. Is that correct?
9 times.
9 sack medley. How about we listen?
4 receivers. Darnold steps away from pressure for a second, but then he is sacked. Darnold back to pass. The pocket is claustrophobic, and he's sacked. Steps up in the pocket. He's holding it too long.
Just run.
Throw it, man. Bounces around in the pocket, and he's sacked for a 6th time. The Rams have hit the pick 6 with sack. Sam bouncing around, looking, holding the ball, and getting destroyed again. Just throw it. Back to pass, and he's taken down for an 8th time. 8 sacks on Sam Darnold.
He could have thrown that football easily, but decided not to.
Right.
And took another sack.
Well, that's 9.
So that's
been sacked 9 times.
9 for today. I mean, that's an epic number.
I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't laugh because there's a lot of Vikings fans in a lot of pain today, but they're so entertaining because, PA's reputation is what, right? Ducky and Bunny guy.
Yeah.
But the beauty of and we've been able to enjoy this all season because we've had Vikings talking points off of the highlights all season and lowlights. And what you learn about PA is he may be Ducky and Bunny, but if he gets PO'd enough, he ain't going to hide it during the game. And so you get those inflections. You get the same thing from Peter Bursich, and it sounded like both of them were pretty exasperated with the number of times that they felt like Sam was just frozen with the ball. And
it felt that way, sitting in the press box too, and we were talking about it, and O'Connell referenced it as well, and Darnold referenced it as well. So it's this weird combination where like we all accept that he was being blitzed a lot, but like that didn't absolve him of the responsibility, totally. Darnold said, like, in those situations, like, a lot of those sacks are my fault because I need to throw it away. I need to dirt it. I need to do whatever. And I said, well, why didn't you? Like, and it kind of just blurted out of me. I didn't necessarily intend for it to be quite that direct, but I said, why didn't you? And he goes, just in the moment, I was just trying to make a play and just didn't think about it. And so, like, he's got this, and some other people have talked about this as well, but like, he's got, playmaker genes in him. Like he doesn't want to give up on a play. One of the first things I remember O'Connell talking about quarterback play when he got here was like the phrase like live to see another down. And like, it's a huge thing that he preaches is like, negative is just like avoid the negative play at all costs and accept that a completion of any amount of yardage will do damage to a defense. And so it may not get us a touchdown. It may not get us a first down, but like we want to be going, like the point of the game is to be moving forward, and we don't. It doesn't have chunk plays are great, and we'll get some of those, but we need to have we need 2 yards instead of -4 or -6. We have and so that's just a very strong part of O'Connell's what he tries to preach, and the fact that Darnold was like repeatedly doing the opposite, I think, was kind of frustrating.
And was it a grand total of 82 negative yards?
I believe it was.
Sacks? And that's a record of all time.
Postseason record.
Postseason record.
Postseason record of yardage lost on sacks. And there was also there were so many stats flying, and you know how I love those.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to keep up with them. At one point, they reached. Whether it was 6 sacks and a half, and it had only happened like 3 times in postseason history, and all 3 times it was Vikings quarterback. Because if you go back to the 87 March to the NFC Championship game, Tommy Kramer and Wade Wilson actually got sacked like a combination of like 8 times.
Was that the New Orleans game?
First game? Yeah, that they won.
They won 44-10.
Yeah, and they got sacked. I don't even know. Like maybe you were
at that game.
How did they get sacked so many times and still win
honestly,
like that?
I have no record. All I remember of that game is they got down 10-0.
Yeah.
Changed quarterbacks, and we were saying, because they backed into the playoffs this year, it's going to be 41 donut. They're going to get thrashed. They ended up scoring 44 unanswered points, but I do not remember that many sacks.
They did, and then the next week, Wade Wilson started the championship game. Kramer.
There was the Niners game in between, and then it was the NFC title game, Wade Wilson against Washington.
And he got sacked 6 or 8 times.
Although, again, they only lost by 7, and they were driving to tie it. Yeah. As opposed to this game where we were never really
which is like, and that probably speaks to how much football has changed in that like sacks were not. I mean, no one ever wanted to be sacked. But sacks were kind of more common, maybe or like not as difficult to overcome. But but obviously in a game in this era, like it's just to be going backwards when you're dropping back is just deadly.
What did we played the soundbite earlier, the 4th and 2 decision at the 50 at the end of the half. I think most people were not offended by that. They might have been offended by the play call and how much yardage was lost. I think it's hard to defend simply because you're going to get the ball to start the second half, and it's the old deal of if you don't get it here, the game is probably over at 24-3.
I was okay with it. I remember thinking at the time that like it already felt like they were at a point where every possession they needed scores in every possession because there was no guarantee there. I mean, the defense was playing better, but like there was no reason to think that that the Rams were suddenly not going to be ever score another touchdown again. So I was in the mode, and maybe that was just kind of spurred by that initial surge by the Rams offensively in the beginning of the game that the Vikings needed to score on every drive that they were going to have. And so I wasn't offended by it.
Couple texts on different subjects worthy, I think, of a minute or two. 415 guy. 415, isn't that Northern California?
I think so. San Francisco. Yeah.
Very good. iHeart, the brand new. Have you downloaded the new iHeartRadio app?
No, you do it on my browser, and that's just not the way to go. Yeah,
no, that's not the way to go. No, we got like an actual radio dial. You got a radio push buttons where you can lock in your favorite.
I'll do that.
iHeart stations. It's tremendous.
You know that if
somebody, you know how much it costs you?
Nothing.
Free.
You know, if somebody has like an out of town area, someone has an out of town area code, it doesn't necessarily mean they live there. Like they might actually.
That's a great point.
They might actually bring their cell phones numbers with them to a new city. They could live across the street from you for all you know.
I'll give you the best example. Sam Mitchell's cell phone is 612 because he kept it when it was here. Yeah, but he doesn't live here anymore. No. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia. So that's a good point.
I've lived here for 6 years and I still have my Iowa area code. Yeah,
that's a good point.
We'll just go. It's
more fun.
We'll just go with the fact that somebody in San Francisco is listening to us right now.
That's the beauty of it. It sounds more exotic.
Yeah.
Here's what he writes. If Sam Darnold severely injured his 2025 prospects with 2 embarrassing games, can we say the same about Brian Flores' head coaching aspirations? Did he take any kind of meaningful hit the last 2 weeks?
I do not think so. I think that,
Lions, the defense was good for 3 quarters.
Yeah. But in a larger sense, I think that, fair or not, whatever, like, it's baked in around the league that Brian Flores is a good X's and O's defense, and that when you give him, some things to work with and the freedom from the head coach, like he's going to have a good defense. And that's happened in New England. It's happened in Miami, and it's now happening in Minnesota. We can pick and choose games or periods of games where it didn't look that good or vulnerabilities were shown. But in the broader scheme, like that's the least of his concerns. I don't think there will be any jobs that he loses ultimately because somebody thinks he's not good enough at the X's and O's. His candidacies are going to lie on people skills, ability to connect with players, his response to the accusations that have been made from people in Miami, and also an owner that is willing to look past the lawsuit. That's where his coaching prospects lie. That's the murky area. The X's and O's, the way they actually played in certain parts of games this season, I don't think affect the larger perception.
Very well said. I believe I couldn't agree with you more. Hopefully, what is happening is this is conspiracy theory guy. Hopefully, what is happening is the Wilfs are waiting to let the Kwesi contract run out. And that way, they'll be able to hire a new GM and conveniently let that new GM rehire KOC so they can keep KOC and avoid the typical deal of having to fire the coach to replace the GM, or the issue of hiring a new GM with a coach in place that isn't his guy. I'm kind of confused by his logic there, but can you translate that for me?
I assume that he means that, like, don't sign O'Connell to an extension, don't sign Kwesi to an extension, let them both go into 2025 in the last year of their deals, and then they get to the end, near the end of that, and like I guess then you jump in and you hire a new GM who comes and then gets there in time to extend O'Connell before he becomes a free agent, which I think logistically wouldn't happen. But I don't think that's even remotely part of the issue. I do think it's interesting that, there could be an interesting discussion about what might or might not, or what's already sort of changed a little bit about the way the Vikings function, in terms of who, the extent to which, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah acknowledges that he leans on coaches for player evaluations, for their suggestions, for their input, and for what they would like to see happen, and kind of plays the point guard role a little bit.
Right.
So, to the extent that people have this perception that O'Connell works for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I don't think that that's really the dynamic in practice.
Were you as bothered as the TV panel was at our lack of quote unquote urgency, even if it felt like the game was getting away from us? The idea of you keep playing, you hope you can break through with some big play, and suddenly a 3-score game becomes a 2-score game, because there was a lot of that on TV. There was also a lot about the idea that we let the last 38 seconds of the third quarter go without, hurry up, we got to run another play. What did you make of all of that?
Well,
and did the coach address that yesterday? Did any of you guys, the Jackals, ask?
We did not get to that.
Okay.
The game was so out of hand that I was already starting to write my story. And so in some cases, I didn't necessarily catch on that that's what they were doing. But obviously the announcers, are watching the game more closely than I was and got into that. I would say, the game seemed over for a while, and you just wanted to get out, get it out of there without any further damage or embarrassment. I would say that I could see where people would be offended because that's a playoff game, and you treat this is not like week 12 where a game hasn't gone the way you want and you're just trying to get ready for there is no next week. And so I could see where some people would be offended that this is these are the most important games of the year. These are where legacies are determined. This is where careers are made or broken. Treat every play of a playoff game with more respect than that, I guess, some people might feel that way, but I certainly don't think that they gave up on an opportunity to win the game.
So give me right now, at least, the biggest name that you believe will not be back on the roster, because we've got a lot of players without contracts, correct?
Yes, there's almost 2
or maybe
dozen.
maybe 2 or 3 that you think that are significant names that either might surprise people or might not, that you think unlikely they're going to be back.
Well, and this is dangerous to view it just on this, but just based on the way Harrison Smith was sort of operating last night and talking last night, I think retirement is more of a possibility than it's ever been for him. It doesn't mean that he won't spend some time away from the facility and from football and then decide in March that he wants to play. But
is it his decision entirely?
Well, he's basically going to be on an expiring contract,
okay.
And so, if I think the Vikings want him back, if he was willing to come back, especially if Flores stays as the defense coordinator. But so that's one that seems like that's where it's headed. Stephon Gilmore, talked about retirement last night. Aaron Jones, I think, is going to be a really interesting one. I think he had it in some ways a career season, but I don't think you need to be like a football savant to say that the way he played in the first 5 or 6 games of the year was a lot. The way he looked, in the 5 or 6 games of the year was a lot different than what he looked like in the last 5 or 6 games. And so, he's age is, is undefeated. And so he, that's another one that I think, they're going to have to bolster that spot one way or the other. And so, we'll see. I know he wants to keep playing and I know he can still contribute, but, we'll see if they, to what extent they value that spot, and do they need it to feel like they need a younger, sprier player in that position.
All right, let's get another break in to stay on schedule. Seifert with us for the rest of the hour. So we got another maybe 10, 15 minutes with him. We'll get to some more Vikings talking points and more texts as well. More thoughts, not just about what happened last night, but the Vikings' future when we come.
Get ready to rock out this summer. Coed and Cambria, they will, and Taking Back Sunday are coming to the Armory August 20th with special guest Foxing. Tickets go on sale this Friday at 10 a.m. Don't miss out. Get all your details at KFAN.com. Keyword calendar.
There's not a street that you can walk.
So the Kevin Seifert prediction for the Vikings quarterback room for 2025, and you're allowed to, you're going to be doing a lot of reporting the next several weeks, but based on your gut and what your feel for it right now, and if you had to make a bet in Vegas, who are our 3 quarterbacks?
3? Well, J.J. McCarthy.
Bold.
Yes, I'll start there.
Yeah.
I think Daniel Jones. I think O'Connell really likes him. It was hard to get out of Daniel Jones when we talked to him on Friday what he thinks about being here. And my guess is when you have a career as a starter for as long as he did, he's not jumping at a chance to be a swing backup type guy yet, but that's probably what's in the cards for him. So here it could be as good as any place. The third quarterback could be anybody. But while I said earlier that I think that there's still a scenario where Darnold signs, I don't see that as being, or returns in some fashion. I don't see that as being the likeliest one right now.
I asked for, how stunned you were with the result last night. How gobsmacked do you think people in the organization are? Because it's a cruel game and it's the nature of it. This isn't the first time this has happened this way, but when you go from, we all saw and talked about the viral images of Darnold being lifted onto, up in the air by players. He comes, sprints into the locker room after the Packers game.
Which was the end of the movie, but the movie wasn't over yet.
It's exactly it. And KOC's to the side beaming, the proud papa. I'm the guy who nurtured this guy and raised him. And now, so was it tears of sadness or was it tears of shock in the locker room?
I think
after
it was
the game?
just I think the tears, from the players and coaches and maybe from the staffers as well, if there were some, was just that there was a lot of pride that they developed because, whether they thought they were going to be any good or not this year, nobody, there really was an example of nobody was saying the Vikings are a sneaky playoff team or the Vikings are a sneaky 14-win team.
No.
I remember sitting here with you and going through the schedule and we're they might be 0-8.
If they don't beat the Giants, they're going to be 0-8.
Yeah, and that's what you said. I didn't say that.
Oh,
no, I probably said that too. I was right that we were all it was universal. And so there is a level of pride that you develop over time to proving the doubters wrong, or like just doing more than people thought you could do, or maybe more than you thought you could as well. And so then now you've had a 5-0 start and you're really good, but like everybody's thinking, well, it's going to crash down, and then they lose a couple games. And I think they're 5-2 at that point, but then they run off 9 straight. And so like it goes from being something that you're very proud of to being like borderline magical. Like this is the kind of thing that like people write books about and like make movies about. And this team that came out of nowhere and had some really, really tough adversity at the very start with the death of Kyrie Jackson and then the injury to JJ McCarthy. Like those were really, you know, on different levels, obviously, but really tough things to have happen. And I think throughout the organization, whether it was, you know, I don't know if everyone like had necessarily decided that they were a Super Bowl favorite, but you start to get the feeling like this is sometimes how teams win Super Bowls, is that like just this confluence of like unexpected and
in an odd year
and like NFC, everybody's healthy and like everybody's happy, and you know you're suddenly the darlings of all of the world. And so I think that the level of sadness that was exhibited last night was just like this thing that we made that was so unexpected and we're so proud of and could have gone in an unbelievable direction is over before we were ready for it to be over. Like I don't know if anybody, you know, from the top down thought that like we're New Orleans, here we come. But they had seen that they didn't necessarily think that 14 wins was coming either. And so I think that's where it came from, and I get it. And they could be a better team next year in terms of the things that we normally track good teams versus bad teams on, and they might not come anywhere close to 14 wins because there's so many other things that can pop up to derail it, and none of those things did this year.
507 guy has a radical suggestion. He calls it going the Lions route by amassing number ones to upgrade talent on both lines and the defensive backfield. Trade KOC for 2 number ones.
Okay.
Trade JJ for 2 more number ones. Tag/trade Darnold. B-Flow takes the reins. Daniel Jones at QB. They'd have 3 ones in 25, 3 ones in 26. Still have cap room to upgrade that way too. Your thoughts?
So get rid of all the best assets you have to build up a championship team
and become the Detroit Lions. Now it might take another 5 years.
They only got rid of one asset, which was a quarterback that didn't want to be there anymore. And so like,
that's true.
And that's the part with the Lions, like, you know, all the credit that they get, like Matthew Stafford went to them and said, like, I'm ready to leave.
Yeah.
And like, they were able to turn that into, not only a bunch of draft picks, but they got a quarterback back that turns out to be as high functioning almost as Stafford and Jared Goff.
Rose Bowl guy. Can you guys touch on Ivan Pace? He seems to be out of position, pushed around a lot, and yet nobody seems to mention it. That's Rose Bowl guy. He also made a couple plays. He's in the running game.
Pace is. There was a reason he wasn't drafted. He's not a 3-down, 245-pound inside linebacker. He's a guy that is a very instinctive and extremely tough player and very quick, who can get into the backfield and make plays. But I don't think, you know, and which is perfect for the Flores scheme. And when he and Cashman are playing next to each other, they complement each other very well. But I think, you know, there was so much excitement about him as a rookie because he came out of nowhere to become a starter. In part in the absence of anybody else that could necessarily hold that down. And I wouldn't say he's a complete player, but there's certain things that he can do that are very good, and that's what they try to focus him on.
Did we get jobbed by the officials on the fumble return for a touchdown?
So, to me, that it was, you can't call it a fumble because his hand was going forward, but like for it not even to be intentional grounding just felt wrong. It's a judgment call.
Receiver's there.
It's a judgment call as to whether there's a receiver in the area. It's a judgment call, but it's not a judgment call as to whether the quarterback could see the receiver because he was almost down on the ground because somebody was sacking him, or like that he had any intent whatsoever to actually complete the pass. He did, according to the rule, get rid of it in a way that wasn't a fumble. But I would love for the intentional grounding rule to be written in a way that would prevent that sort of manipulation from happening.
If that play had stood as it was called
10-10
on the field, are we sitting here talking about chance to beat the Eagles, or is that ridiculous?
I mean, it would have tied it up, but it wouldn't have had any effect on whether the offense could move the ball or score. And so, that was ultimately where that game was scuttled.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, obviously, you want it if you can get it. Would have made it more interesting. Yeah. But and I think it was the right call. I tend to agree with you on the grounding part, but there's no doubt he consciously gave up the ball and pushed it forward. Yeah. You don't have to do a complete passing, but you can push it forward. I mean, there's passes that are completed that way. And I thought it was a very smart, savvy play by a veteran QB.
Right. It's like basketball with free throws. You don't have to shoot them. You can shoot them underhand if you want. Whatever way you can deliver the ball to a receiver is you're allowed to do.
I appreciate you coming in. We're not done, by the way, so don't think like you're off the hook for the rest of the season, even though the Vikings are done. You know that, because there's too much stuff to discuss. There's going to be... I know you guys are having some sessions with the head coach. Is it later this week, maybe?
Yeah.
You're hoping? And then there's other maybe playoff stuff to talk about. Maybe you don't have to come in, but we can still keep it going, I hope, for at least a bit.
Sounds good.
Outstanding. Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com, with great stuff as always. We've got a half hour to go because now no short shows for us, unfortunately, forever. The Abyss. The Sports Abyss has indeed begun. I don't think we can talk a lot about Gopher men's basketball at this point because, I guess we could do a countdown, a quest for their first Big Ten victory. That might be kind of fun or snarky, but maybe some Wolves. But in the last half hour of this show, we'll get to some more Vikings talking points and more of your texts. Will stay with the theme throughout today's program.
Grand in Your Hand is back on KFAN. We have 9 chances for you to win $1,000 every weekday. That's every hour from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 10 or keywords and learn more. Head to KFAN.com.
If I'm not mistaken, the Vikings had a couple of rather key turnovers that went against them. Why don't we play that soundbite? Because I don't think we did it earlier in the program. It's painful, but we have to tell this. We have to, as we say on this show, follow the story.
Minnesota 1 of 4 on third down. It's 3rd and 8 from the Rams 48. C.J. Ham to the left of Sam Darnold out of the shotgun. The Rams rush forward. Darnold hit as he throws, and he throws an interception to the right side. Right to Kobe Durant. Jordan Addison, the intended receiver. And now the Rams have sacked Sam Darnold 3 times, and they've now picked him off Kobe Durant with his 2nd interception, including regular season. 3rd and 8 from the Rams 39. Rams lead by 7. C.J. Ham in the backfield with Sam Darnold to his left. Darnold out of the shotgun. Darnold back to pass. Sacked 3 times. Dropped the ball. It's a strip sack for the Rams. And it's picked up by Jared Verse. And here comes the rookie. Inside the 30 to the 20 to the 10. Touchdown, L.A. Rams. Jared Verse, with his first National Football League touchdown with 4.5 minutes to go in the first half, has propelled the LA Rams to a 16-3 lead.
Ball game was over then, as far as I'm concerned. By the way, we didn't need Verse. We could have drafted him. We took Dallas Turner, and the scuttlebutt, of course, is Turner's like 3 or 4 years younger, but will he ever be what Verse already is? God, that guy's really. We talked about. We tried to warn people the day of the game, and even maybe on sermons. A lot of discussion about the Los Angeles Rams' very underrated defense. A very what's the word for it? Low compensated defense. They got a lot of kids on the team, and none of them have gotten paid yet. Now, a couple of them will eventually. But they have, I think the number was $25 million less in defensive payroll than any other team in the National Football League. I hope they give the Eagles a game. I'd like to see a good game there. I don't know, how Stafford will handle those conditions. Eagles defense could be pretty good. Their defensive line, good. My guess is they will get more pressure in on him than the Vikings were able to. But those are the 2 turnovers, both Darnold related, and I really thought it was. I mean, ultimately, we knew it was over at 24-3. at the end of the first half, but it almost felt like at 17, it's like, well, this game. That's the weird thing is we're talking about Seifert. It almost felt like from the moment the game started, the game was getting away from them, right? First play is a 26-yard pass to Nakua, and it just sort of, you almost felt like, oh, the Rams just aren't here to be here, because the Rams didn't have a great season. Vikings had a clearly better season, but they seemed pretty serious about their intent and about their, you could say certainly their football intellect. That's a well-coached club. There's not any question. I think we knew that going in, but now we probably know it even longer, or even more intensely, I guess I should say. KFAN text line is still open at 64686. By the way, when does your hockey team play again? Is it tomorrow night?
I believe tomorrow.
Yeah, that was tomorrow.
Yeah.
We ultimately lost to Vegas. Was it 3-1?
Yeah, it wasn't good.
We were up 1-0, right? And were we?
It ended up being 4, but that's
was it 4? Okay. Yeah. And were we pretty much dominated, or what? What do you remember about what should we know about that game?
It just looked like one of those games where they didn't have the firepower that they needed to. So and the Oilers come to town. If I'm old enough to remember the last time the Oilers came to town a couple of months ago, it was a shellacking. I think it was like 6-1 or something like that.
Hey, can we do a live listen in? Guardsy is with the Golden Gopher women's basketball team, now ranked, and it's a showdown game in Maryland against highly ranked and probably compensated University of Maryland Terps.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Race with the hand check, and we have a timeout. Good pace to start the game. Amaya Battle ready to go tonight. Has 9 of Minnesota's 13. They lead Maryland 13-11 with 4:15 to go in the first quarter. Timeout on the floor. Maryland ball when we come back. It's Golden Gopher women's basketball from Learfield.
There's that.
There's that. Well, we hit the break. That's okay. That works just as well. 612 guy reminding us that the Rams are 9-2 in their last 11. They had a great season after 1-4 start. That's a fair point. They were hot, and I think their pattern is the same as it was a year ago, right? Where they started slow. Well, this year, after their slow start, you remember what Florio suggested to PA? Florio said Vikings should go after Stafford. And there were even rumors out of Los Angeles that the Rams were thinking about selling some of the assets off. And I'm sure that at this point they're glad that they didn't, because they're at least in it to this extent. And as long as you have a defense like that, I think they'll be interesting. They can run the ball a little bit. I love the receivers, especially Nakua. I have always, I don't know if I'd say if I prefer, but I have always felt really good about big, strong, physical receivers. That guy's like a tight end. And there are 2 or 3 receptions he made yesterday where it looks like it's going to be about a 6-yard pass, and he turns it into 10 or 11 just on sheer determination and strength. So they're going to be an interesting out for the Eagles. They are, as I said earlier, a well put together club. Not a great team by any means, but they kind of know how to play. And they're also a team that's, as we said, they're not afraid to play in the teens, as we say in the business. They're all right winning 17-13. They aren't as explosive as they likely were in that Buffalo shootout game they had where they beat the Bills. I think they might have gotten a kick for a touchdown in that game too. But that was my fear. My assumption all along was if the Vikings could get to 24. They could win the game. What was the final score, as it turns out, last night? Vikings-Rams?
Oh, yeah.
Final score again?
It was the score. It was like 27-9 or something. I was listening to see if Guardsy was.
I'm sorry. Well, that's okay. We don't need him. We just got a taste of it. That's fine. And as I
had to do the morning show. I went to bed at the third quarter.
Yeah, you're kind of punchy, is what I heard at this point, right? A little on the punchy side?
Yeah, 27-9.
27-9. So obviously 24 wasn't going to be enough. I thought the Rams would win the game if it was in the teens. I did expect the Rams to win. I'm not going to lie to you, but same as with the Lions game where I picked the Lions, I did not think in either case it would end up being as embarrassing as it was. And it was embarrassing. Let's be honest about it. You elevate to a place where you win 14. You could lose your last two, but you can't lose that way. And you can't lose that decisively. And you can't especially play that poorly offensively. And a lot of that I know was Darnold, but I also think, and I'm glad to hear Seifert agrees with me, that it's a little bit more complicated than that. It does have to do with the ability to adjust no matter what you think you should be able to get done. And really even no matter what seems from your eye to be open deep downfield, if your quarterback's not completing those plays or doesn't have time to complete those plays, then at least have the decency to try a plan B. It might not work, but I think you at least have to try. And apparently Belichick got into that same subject with the Manning boys on the Manning cast last night as well. I never flipped over to that broadcast. One more break. We will wrap up the program and not only remind you what you might have missed, but what we will have coming up on tomorrow's program as the Abyss officially begins.
It's the Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
Brought to you by American Pressure.
I want to thank our outstanding guest lineup today. That includes Kevin Seifert, who just wrapped up a good solid hour in studio. In addition, Johnny Athletic in the 4 o'clock hour, and a great kind of emotional conversation with Viking safety Cam Bynum, who's joined us all year. And he took one last look back at the shock of last night, looked forward, was very philosophical and very emotional. And there are a couple times during the interview when he got interrupted because he's doing it in the locker room and players are leaving. And so they're saying goodbye to one another as well, not knowing, when several of them will, if ever, be together. I highly recommend you podcast that. Cam joined us, probably about 3:15 till the bottom of the hour, till about 3:30. Gophers women's basketball teams in Maryland, and the Terps are ranked 8th in the country. Minnesota in the rankings at 24. First time Golden Gopher women's basketball has been ranked since I think the last time was 2019. So it's been 6 years. So it's early, but the first quarter they are competing kind of nicely. Are the Golden Gophers? We heard Garzi on the call a little while ago. I'm assuming Garzi's back tomorrow. Are you on tomorrow, or is Garzi back?
As far as I know, it's Garzi.
As far as you know, because you've done.
But I am available.
Triple duty today, right?
Yeah.
2 different morning shows. And what else was there today? And this show.
And yeah.
That's it. Vikings Rewind's going to follow us. Is that the deal as usual?
It is correct. And then Wild Weekly as well.
I'm reminded by one of our texters that, maybe the bulletin board material that we referenced did end up motivating the Rams more than we know. That was what we were told, that indeed the Rams were made very much aware of the commentary from Dan Campbell, the Lions head coach, upon shaking hands with KOC after destroying the Vikings, his team destroying the Vikings on Sunday Night Football. Campbell did the old, "We'll see you in 2 weeks." And we all thought, well, that was, Danny Campbell's way of sort of complimenting and, giving consolation to being classy with KOC. But a couple people suggested maybe that's just checkers. Maybe the chess move was he knew it would get back to the Rams. They would take it personally, and his team wouldn't have to worry about playing the Vikings. I don't know if they'd have been terrified of the matchup based on what we saw the last 2 weeks, but, you never know. So, but it was confirmed, although I didn't hear anything about it last night after the game, it was confirmed that all over Rams practice facility and so forth, that comment was up on the board somewhere. So Who's to say? It's further reason why I believe Dan Campbell does deserve to be the National Football League Coach of the Year. What role did the Detroit game play in our loss this week? Who's to say? I mean, it couldn't have helped. I think it has to take away a little bit of your bravado and your confidence, even if it's quote unquote just one game and you're still in the playoffs. When you've been, as successful most of the season and have so rarely been dominated to that degree, I think it's got to hurt a little bit. But, I'm not sure we'll ever get the answer to that question. Tomorrow what's tomorrow, Wednesday? Yeah, it's Tuesday because we had a Monday night game. So tomorrow, Kessler, I think in studio, there's all kinds of stuff going on at the state capitol. I think the DFLers did not, on the House side, did not show up for work. So there's a lot of controversy there. We'll get into it with Kessler. The whole story is embarrassing to the state of Minnesota. This is a state that I think needs to start being less haughty about itself, that everything works so well here. There's a lot of things that, quite frankly, ain't working very well, and it's whatever side you want to take on this one, it's an embarrassing look, the dysfunction that we're starting the session with. So we'll get at all that with him tomorrow. And I think, I'm not sure if Mace is back or not, but either way, I want to talk to Mace because we still have, of course, the national championship game yet to come, right, in college football. And we'll get caught up on a couple of other stories as well. So that will be, off the top of my head, the guest. Oh, and Louie. We had to move Louie. So Louie will be on tomorrow as well. We kind of moved him off of today for the obvious reason there was going to be a lot of Vikings chatter and conversation. So a good full show. We'll try to make the best of the fact that we are now in the semi-abyss period. And it is, I mean, I wanted at least, selfishly, from a seasonal boost standpoint, I wanted at least another week. I wanted both Green Bay and the Vikings in it for another week. You know what I mean?
It would have been nice.
It would have been nice. I mean, at least one more week, for God's sake. But it's over already.
Just like that.
It's remarkable. Thanks for helping out today. I know you had a long day, so we appreciate your persistence and the talking points. And we'll start it all over again tomorrow, beginning at 3 o'clock right here in the Fan.
Whenever you call me, I'll be there. Whenever you want me, I'll be there. Whenever you need me, I'll be there.
Sorry, KFAN.